morning, namaskar. Um, Once again for the day. It is good afternoon in India. We have a lot of folks to join from India as well. This is our first webinar for the year 2021. We had a phenomenally series of webinars for last year 2020, and thanks to technology, brought in a lot of important speakers and personalities to share their thoughts in progressing in managing the COVID during the 2020. We are expecting this 2021 better and having a lot of hope in facing this pandemic. Although the cases are increasing more than last year, but we have reached to a solution uh, which is believed to be effective, and we will all have a hope on it. With that note, I would firstly welcome the speakers for the session. We have Mr. Ravi Dev, as well as Honorable Consulate for Canada, Mr. Patrick Healy from Suriname. We have a custom for the webinar that we do an introduction about Indo-Caribbean society before we go into the session. And I would like to invite Dr. Dheeraj Bansal, the Dean of College of Medicine, Texila American University, to give an introduction about Indo-Caribbean society to the members in this forum. Over to you, sir.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Bala. And a very good morning to everyone. And also a good evening to our friends who are joining us from India. I welcome each and every one of you for this session of Indo-Caribbean Society. As you know, during our inaugural event last year, we mentioned the genesis of this society, its mission, vision, goals, and explained the wide range of intended membership. We are hoping to interest new members of Indian diaspora in the Caribbean region to join our society as we move forward. This society was initiated by Texila American University team and interest groups from the Caribbean region, mainly, as you know, from Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, and Suriname. The idea for the formation of the society was in response to many queries of ways and means in formulating tangible links between India and its diaspora outside our mainstream connections. The Indo-Caribbean Society was envisaged in 2018 with the vision and mission to unify and advance our Indo-Caribbean interests by fostering a joint and collaborative action among different people, organizations, and businesses. The Indo-Caribbean Society aims to create awareness about the heritage between India and Caribbean communities, especially among the younger generation. Furthermore, it aims to promote goodwill, friendship, and unity among the Indian and Caribbean communities. Also, the intention is to organize social, educational, health-related, and cultural activities to achieve the goals and objectives of the society, uh, providing a global forum, if you will, for the exchange and dissemination of knowledge and ideas. The theme of the society focuses on areas such as the cultural community, research, education, youth engagement, business to business networking, and also organization of workshops, seminar, conferences, and exhibitions for the same, as mentioned earlier. So I thank you all for being a part of today's event, and you're joining us in encouraging persons, uh, more people to join this society. Please feel free to invite new members across the Indian and Caribbean regions. The chapter exists and are planned to include persons from across the following countries and cities in the Caribbean region, such as Jamaica, Suriname, Trinidad, and Tobago. The membership comprises of organizations, businesses, institutions, foundations and individuals. I would also encourage, you or anybody else who is interested to please go to our website and check it out. Uh, so Mr. Bala was giving a heads up of the events we have done in 2020. So just to recap, uh, there was a business climate of Guyana, where Mr. Ramesh Duku, the Private Sector Commission of Guyana, presented. Another event was Global Pandemic COVID-19 Indian Scenario, in which Professor Banerjee, Post Chancellor Shiksha Anusandhan, deemed university in India, presented. The third event we had was Ayurvedic Practice in Caribbean, in which Mr. Amika Anod, sorry, Ayurvedic practitioner from Suriname, he presented. The fourth event was possible partnership with organization associations in the region and building businesses for the members, in which Mr. Ramesh Prasad, IPED, Guyana presented. And the last event was agricultural business development, in which Honorable Minister Mr. Floyd and Honorable Minister Mr. Zulfikar, along with people from Tamil Nadu Agricultural University of India, presented. So that was a recap of the events. I am hoping that 2020, 2021 will be more eventful and we can achieve even more in 2021. With that note, thank you everyone, and I welcome you all one more.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dean. So I would like to invite Honorable Mr. Patrick Healy for his speech for the today. He is the Chief Executive Officer of VSH Limited. VSH Limited, one of the largest holding companies in Suriname. Giving back means carrying the responsibility to help build our society and our community. The VSH Community Fund was established in 19 August 2008 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the group. The community fund is financed by the VSH United Group companies. He is also working in the capacity of Honorary Consulate of Canada to Suriname. So we invite you once again for this session, sir. It's over to you, and I would like you to speak on this topic which we have set for today.
You go trying to put on my camera. Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to the Indo-Caribbean Society for the invitation. Yeah, my resume was sent up. I think it's interesting or important, most definitely for our cultural society, Indo-Caribbean Cultural Society. They understand a little bit my background, and same thing will be reflected in my little speech, I guess, if you want to put it that way. I was born in Suriname on April 8, 1962. I'm the youngest of 7 children from Irish descendant American parents that were introduced uh, in the 50s to Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname while they had careers with Alcoa or more the bauxite industry in general. My parents basically decided in 1958 to make Suriname their home, and the VSH group was started in 1958. That was the first company that we had registered, the trading company. My schooling was, for the most part, elementary and middle school in Suriname, and I went to college in New Jersey, Fairleigh Dickinson University, and I have a bachelor's degree in construction engineering. In 1985, I had a career in the construction industry as a cost engineer in the USA in St. Martin. And in Suriname, one of the companies that we had set up in the 80s was a steel fabricating plant. Proudly, I can give on that Guyana was one of our strongest export markets. We did the CARICOM building, Gift Lamp Mall, a whole bunch of other buildings in Guyana. So Guyana has been very good to the VSH steel business. Unfortunately, the competitive environment, economies of scale, we had to shut down the steel fabricating plant a couple of years ago. But still, proud to mention that the VSH has been able to make a contribution in the construction industry in Guyana for some of these very notable buildings. Basically, I got into the logistics segment of the VSH group in the 90s, and I've been doing that for the most part till 2012. And I'm now the CEO of the company around 2012, and the company is operating in 4 countries: Suriname, we have an office in Guyana, USA, Miami, Netherlands, Rotterdam, and also our manufacturing segment. I just mentioned the steel fabricating plant, but we're also under the VSH Group falls CIC. That's the manufacturing company for the ozone cleaning products, powder products, and all of that good stuff. We also make butter and margarine, and we export to 14 CARICOM countries. So we're not only aggressively working in the Suriname market, but also in the CARICOM markets. Having said that, I very much support initiatives to build connections between Caribbean nations. Guyana and Suriname most definitely share a border, and the relationship between the people has been very harmonious for the longest time. I'm again born and raised there, and gone over to Guyana many times since, even with my dad many years ago, and it's been always been a healthy relationship. Business relationships have been strong, and private sector investment initiative both ways between Suriname to Guyana, Guyana to Suriname has materialized successfully over the last couple of years. And there's a number of companies both ways that we can refer to that have taken the step to consider Guyana and Suriname within the CARICOM Caribbean community to possibly look at it as a joint market strategy to strengthen their company and to ensure company growth moving forward. Specifically on the subject of Caribbean culture and globalization, yes, you've heard my intro. I'm a businessman pretty much, so it will be pretty much a private sector perspective, a business to business type of an approach more, because that's where my background comes from and the company that I represent, and that I enthusiastically promote business relations building between all of the Caribbean nations. And I've been fortunate to be able to travel to a lot of them and have experienced very good business relationships across the Caribbean. I consider that the Caribbean has always been part of the globalization process in some way or another. So Caribbean culture and globalization, in my opinion, is not really something new. Early agriculture, mining activities such as bauxite during the colonial periods facilitated the export of Caribbean products to the world while exposing the already very diverse cultural communities of the Caribbean to multinational business practices. This I consider to be an early start of globalization. As I mentioned before, as the youngest of 7 children from Irish descent, American parents brought to Trinidad, Suriname. Okay, as I was firsthand exposed to the Caribbean export product development, aluminum for this part, mining, and the interaction between quote unquote the American family culture that I was brought up in, although I was born here, and the new Suriname community that our parents chose to make our home. Suriname is even more diverse because in addition to the blacks, the Indians, we also have the Indonesian community. So that even makes us a more of a diverse cultural environment, and it's been a pleasure experiencing this. And I think my parents also chose Suriname for the harmonious community that we live in. The interaction of global business experience and American Caribbean culture basically lit the fire of enthusiasm with the Healy family to start the business. And with great support from the Suriname community, this company developed into what we are now. Please, if you're interested about our company, we have a website. Annual reports are all posted there, and the website can give you a good oversight of this company. Like I mentioned, a company with locations in Paramaribo, Georgetown, Miami, Rotterdam, a company whose manufacturing segments export to 14 countries. Over the years, many global curious Suriname, Guyanese, but Caribbean nationals in general took advantage of the opportunities with multinationals operating in our countries to go and work and travel abroad, to experience the world. Just about anywhere you go in the world, you can run into a Surinamese or Guyanese national just about anywhere. And we now refer to this, I guess, group as the Diaspora, and we can proudly reflect back on a very strongly established Diaspora, intellectually and supposedly financially, uh, strong capacity building uh, effort that has developed over the years. So again, globalization goes two ways. Yes, multinationals came to Suriname, Guyana, Caribbean, but we also went out and we learned our ways. And proudly, we can look at a lot of the diaspora, whether it's the Suriname community in Holland or the Guyanese community in New York or Canada, or the Jamaican community in England, or the Trinidad. It's all over the place too. So we did not sit still as a Caribbean community. We also spread our wings, and we still maintain very strong ties with our countries of origin, which makes us, I think, an important uh, business environment that can support new developments. So, in my perception, the Caribbean culture has already been exposed to many forms of globalization over the years, whether it's by multinationals setting up businesses in the Caribbean or Caribbean nationals traveling abroad to broaden their global experience. Important to recognize is that Suriname and Guyana, as Caribbean community members, are now experiencing, to try and use, I guess, some of the COVID terminology, a second wave of globalization, which is led for the most part by the developing offshore industries in the oceans and in the coastal areas in front of Guyana and Suriname. This is a good thing. We are expecting tremendous economic opportunities from this, and we welcome, for the most part, as business communities, but also I think the politics and also the communities in general, we welcome this second wave of invasion of oil companies coming to our shores to set up shop and to start doing business. But it's very important that we use the lessons learned from the past to strengthen our positions at the negotiating table, whether it be as local companies or as Suriname Guyana nationals soliciting for a job or looking for opportunities to set up their own companies. Please consider your past. Please consider your culture. Consider the diaspora that's available out there. Consider your options smartly to try and position yourself strongly at the negotiating table. We have always welcomed globalization in the Caribbean communities in different shapes and forms in the past, and we have become stronger, most definitely as a Suriname Guyana Caribbean community members. We have the experience, we've gone through it before, and we again welcome this new globalization wave, but we must use our own quote unquote global experience in whatever shape it may be to strive to get a larger piece of the economic pie this time around. You know, to international companies, and if there's even diaspora members, but anybody who's looking to come to invest in Guyana, Suriname, trying to take advantage of the newly developing offshore industry and everything around it, I would strongly suggest for all of these individuals or companies to get informed about the local rules and regulations. It's not rocket science in Guyana. It's not rocket science in Suriname. Yes, we have our hurdles. Both Holland is the same way, USA is the same way, and we can always knit and pick away at corruption and at inefficiency, blah, blah, blah. Suriname, VSH, number of companies in Guyana. I don't want to name any names as to miss out on a few, but a number of companies have shown strength and have established themselves in these two communities. We have a proven track record as businesses with our local employees and with our countries to be able to survive very dire economic times, revolutions, government mismanagement, etc., etc., etc. And we became stronger because of it. So I can guarantee you a lot of the companies and organizations presenting themselves now on our shores wouldn't even survive a day the environments that we have gone through in the past 45, 50, 60 years. And we did it. A lot of Guyanese companies are still standing strong. A lot of Suriname companies are still standing strong. And we are able to stand our ground at the negotiating table. Again, like I said before, to make sure that this new wave, this new global entry into our markets, that we make sure to strive this time around to get a little larger piece of the pie. Do your market entry correctly. Yeah. Whether it's as a standalone company, you want to come into our market standalone and do your own thing, no problem. We welcome that. Bring your capacity, whether it's as Diaspora or anybody else for that matter. If you can make a good, smart contribution to our communities, we welcome you for the most part. And look smartly at local strategic partners. Because you know what? We know our market, we know our communities, and we know how to buy and sell. We know how to trade. We know how to provide services efficiently and effectively in our business communities. Respect local culture and traditions. And like I said, I'm a product of that environment, and so are many other, whether it's in the Indian community, whether it's in the Indonesian community in Suriname, whether it's Lebanese, whether it's you name it, anybody, the Black community that have come in or were brought into our communities have stood our ground. And as a proud Caribbean culture, we can handle this second wave of globalization the way I'm mentioning it, or the way I see it as a business from a business perspective, to be able to grow our individual companies, the person that works for us, and our communities. So that was a little bit my 2 cents, I guess, and I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. Where you have left with us a new phrase of business, that is second wave globalization. Yeah, we truly accept that. Pandemic brought in a lot of positivity in connecting people, networking people, and this can be called as a next globalization, and it is happening. It's visible. People helping, our government helping each other is phenomenal during this time. And India have also done to an extent in terms of sharing their vaccine to Bangladesh, Brazil, South Africa, and so on in pipeline. So thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Patrick, and thank you for joining with us. And now I would ask, like, if any of our viewers have any questions, we would like to take it in for next 1 minute. Fine. Viewers, like, you can post the questions in chat. Now, on to the second presentation of Mr. Ravi Dev. Our presenter have a lot of achievement under him. That is, he is basically an economist and JD member of New York Bar. Uh, he is a corporate executive in New York City, founding member of Gopio, leader of ROAR, was a member of parliament between 2001 to 2006. He is also Karyavaha for Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, Sangalak 2011 to present, and media consultant and columnist for Times Media Group. So we welcome you for this today's session, and it's over to you, sir.
Namaskar, Assalamu alaikum, peace, grace, and hope to all in the audience. And thank you, first of all, Texila University, for inviting me to give a little talk on Caribbean culture and globalization. I was pleased to hear that Patrick studied at Fairleigh Dickinson University, so it's a very small world. My home in United States, where I studied, was in a little town where Fairleigh Dickinson is located. So shout out there to Patrick, and I hope we can get together and share some notes on Teaneck, where you probably went by Teaneck Avenue and Queen Anne's Road and all of that. Anyhow, so back to our talk, Caribbean culture and globalization. The two really are very, very much connected because Caribbean culture itself is a consequence of the very, very first initiation, beginning of globalization. Because this thing called globalization could not have occurred without the humans on this planet realizing they're on a globe. And this only occurred when Christopher Columbus went westwards in search of a trade route to India, and he didn't fall off the edge as everyone thought he would. The theory that we are a globe happened to pan out, and he stumbled across the West Indies, in his particular case, in the Bahamas. And that was the beginning of globalization. We were a globe, and this impetus to seek new trade routes, which was an economic impetus. Before then, you had to only transport goods from the East. And at that time, let's not forget that India and China produced almost half of the GDP of the world at that time. And Europe was a mere backwater, now struggling to get up. But be as it may, as they initiated this new route through their sailing ships and came there, this is what now flowered and gave us what we today know as globalization. This interconnectedness, which started with sailing ships, but has now gone beyond sailing ships to motor cars, to jet planes, and now we have connectivity through the internet and other IT innovations, where here we are speaking to each other from all of the continents probably, and we can speak in real time, share our ideas in real time, and also do maybe production in real time. Because if I have an inkjet printer in, let's say, Timbuktu, I can do 3D printing from my screen here if I have the proper hookup. You're talking of actually getting into production, not just talking in this nebulous fashion as we may feel is just talking and communicating through words or through these pictures. But to come back to our topic of Caribbean culture and globalization, I want to start with to say that the Caribbean, while it may be small and in the eyes of some insignificant, it has a lot of lessons for the rest of the world in this new globalized world. Because what globalization, while it started with an economic drive, and of course that's what still moves globalization, economics can only be pushed by people. It is pushed by people. And all human beings are carriers of what we call culture. It is culture that is what drives us. Each of us come with a culture. It is transmitted whether in our homes, in our school, through magazines, through books, or what have you. But there's something in our head, and we call that culture. There's a shorthand way we can talk about culture, that it offers us a perspective, That's one P, three Ps, perspective. It also makes us engage in certain practices. And finally, it also gives us the ability to create certain products. So we can see culture as three Ps: a perspective, which gives us the ability to engage in certain practices, and some of those practices produces built products. And it is those three aspects that become intertwined and to make us uniquely human, but at the same time different. So if we look at what happened in the Caribbean in that first global encounter, I think it bears a lesson for the globe and for every country in the world. And this is one area where the Caribbean experience has not been given enough importance. Because if you go, as they say in the Sound of Music, we must start at the very beginning. And if we start at the beginning of both globalization and this cultural contact between groups, if you start at the beginning, you may find out things that may assist us where we are today. So what happened in the Caribbean? First of all, the Europeans coming from Europe, first the Spanish, then the British, the French, the Dutch, the Danish, everybody and their uncle, Portugal, claimed the so-called new land. And why could they do so? It came out of superior force. So let us not ever get sidelined. All conquests, whether it is mental or physical or what have you, comes out at the bottom line, physical force. This is sometimes aestheticized. We preen over it and we pretend, well, we're coming here for humanitarian purposes. We're coming here to save your society. We're coming here to protect your borders. But at the bottom line, all globalizing movements up to now are for economic reasons, and it is undergirded by force. So when the Americans, let's say, went to Iraq to save Kuwait, well, we still have some unfinished business going on over there. And this is why we have to come into this thing with our eyes open. The second thing we should learn from this Caribbean culture coming out of globalization is that the superior weapon-bearing culture will always dominate the lesser culture. So when we say there's a cultural contact, the equation is never equal, it is never balanced. It is always tilted in one area, and invariably to those who have more force. So whether you look at the Caribbean, where the initial indigenous people were wiped out in all of the islands and only remain in Guyana and Suriname, that was only the first stage. So, Africans were brought as slaves, and that process of enslavement was not simply to extract their labor, as Marx would put it, freely. They were also hegemonized. The Europeans went into their head and wiped out their culture by defining their African culture as inferior, as primitive, as pagan, as beyond the pale. And therefore they had to adopt European culture. But this is what was never said, that if you adopt a different culture that is not in yours, you are now trying to lift the standards where you can never measure up. You will always be trying to be like them. And whenever you imitate someone, they can move the goalposts. They can always shift the goalposts and create new criteria. So you never ever catch up and you're always behind the eight ball. And that is what we have to learn in the present world, that after 500 years of cultural contact, Africans in the Caribbean and in the other people in the Caribbean are still trying to free themselves from what the reggae singer Bob Marley said, free themselves from mental slavery. And this is what causes most of the problem in the so-called third world. You look at our Caribbean, whether you like it or not, people of higher color still are automatically delegated to a higher position. That comes out of the colorism out of Africa. Even India, as large as India is one of the most hegemonized countries in the world, where the present government, trying to represent a Hindu majority, is facing a tremendous pressure from a tiny minority which still aspires to European values. So this whole notion of cultural hegemony, which has enslaved our minds, is something that we'll have to deal with. So for example, I see my fellow villager, Krishna, whom I introduced myself to before the program began, who works with suicide. Now, suicide in the diaspora Indian, whether we are in Guyana, Trinidad, Suriname, Natal in South Africa, Fiji, our rate of suicide is at least 5 to 10 times that of other people, native people. It means, therefore, that whatever happened to us when we came out of India and were plunked into this new countries where we are, it caused pressures to us. And there are all kinds of theories that abound. You know, Durkheim might talk about anomie, and you can talk of rootlessness and what have you. Right now is not the place. But the fact is, a lot of our problem is cultural. The Indian never drank alcohol in village India, where we were brought, right? Take, for example, coming back to suicide. In 19th century India, the suicide rate was 0.006, whereas in the Caribbean, it jumped to about 100 per 1,000. Right now, Guyana is the highest suicide rate in the world. Still remains. Alcoholism, we never drank alcohol in the Bhojpuri villages from which we were brought. But when you came here, the Europeans put a rum shop, as we call it, a liquor store, right in front of the pay office where you got your money. So after you got your money, you then were encouraged to go to the rum shop, spend all your money on alcohol to ensure that you'll come back Monday to work because all your money was gone. So I want to make this case, without going into more examples, that we in the Caribbean have been facing this notion of hegemony and to try to free ourselves from it. So whether we now see the Black Lives Matter in the United States, it comes out of that same nexus between a superior culture and a weaker culture where you had to inculcate values that were dysfunctional to you. Dysfunctional to you. You understand? So when you blame the African Guyanese or the African American for not having what is called a nuclear family, well, during slavery, a man could not even marry an African woman. So if after 400 years of being socialized to have what you may call serial polygamy, to being impregnated by any white man who feels like it, this is now becomes a structural problem which will take a lot of unpacking for us to get a handle on. But I want to say then that this whole notion of Caribbean culture has a lot to teach the rest of the world, especially now in America and in England and in every European country. The chickens are now coming home to roost, because either in America, where they try to sweep the problems of their colored people under the carpet, or in Britain that try to do the same, from those same colonies that they exploited. Those people went there after World War II to become the bus drivers and the street cleaners. Similarly, in Germany, the Turks went, and in every European country. So now you have the liberal system saying we have a norm of equality. But these people know that their lived experience is not being equal, and you're getting a kickback. Newton said to every reaction, there's an equal and opposite, to every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And what we're seeing playing out culturally in these so-called developed countries and turning them upside down is a reaction to this hegemony that will have to be overthrown. India, at long last, 60 years after, 70 years after independence, India is finally de-hegemonizing its mind and saying, you know what, we have something to tell the rest of the world. We have something to show the rest of the world. So the fact that Modi and his government are willing to share their vaccine while Europe and America are saying we must get ours first, that is a civilizational impulse. It's a civilizational impulse because, for example, in Indian culture, you look first, it is said, you look to what is the good, the greater good, call it dharma. You look at what upholds dharma, what action upholds dharma, what action sustains a culture, and that is dharma, whatever upholds and sustains. And you can't be hogging everything for yourself and say you will sustain the world and you want to be a world leader. And the other thing is that these values will not be transmitted through just speech. It will come through action. So we are at a critical juncture in world history where we are facing a global threat. So if globalization is so good that we must share everything we have, you have financialized markets where money can flow in and out. We're finding with immigration, no, money can come in and out, but labor can't come in and out. So while in the past you used to bring in indentured servants as you want, like my indentured servants, the new indentured servants in America, the H-1B visa holders, where you bring them in to do jobs at a lower rate, you're stopping them, as Trump did, is going to have a kickback. So to come back to my point, we are at the cusp in world history, and we in the Caribbean should take advantage of it to teach the rest of the world, small as we are, how have we dealt with what are called plural societies. And there's a great theorist from the island of Martinique called Glissant. He said that the West talk of culture as if it's a taproot. You know, taproot from botany, there's one root that goes in. So that root was invariably the European root. Everything flows from Europe. If you want to know how to eat, you must eat with fork and knife. So if I want to eat with my fingers, and as we say in Guyana, in Bhojpuri, we sane our food, that is looked down. I can't go to the Marriott and sane. People will snicker at me. So I have to eat like a British. I have to dress like a, look at me with my coat and my jacket here. I put this on deliberately. If I didn't have on a jacket, if I have a jacket, I'm seen somehow better. You know, the first time I went on television in Guyana to have a program, the man told me, you must put on a jacket, man. You're talking to the people. This makes us civilized, see? Jacket wala. And so to come back to this point I want to make, we are in the Caribbean have this opportunity to teach, to de-hegemonize. And I want to close on this note, coming back to the business opportunity that Patrick Healy spoke about earlier. Coincidentally, globalization start to find gold. Well, they didn't find gold, but they found agriculture and they bought labor. But right now, what drove globalization was the steam engine. And you needed fuel for the steam engine. So first you had coal, and then of course you had oil and gas and what have you. We are literally at the end of the fossil fuel era. After 200 years, and Guyana and Suriname, the oil play of Guyana and Suriname are the two largest find and will be the last find to be exploited because every oil company has now announced they are out of oil and they are going into renewables. So I would like to echo what Patrick said. Our leaders in the Caribbean, and we have to take a Caribbean approach. You know, it's not Guyana and Suriname. It is Guyana, Trinidad. Their oil has been exploited. Where are they? They are now founding around. They have to take away all scholarships to UV. You can't get a scholarship to go to UV. The oil is gone. And our bauxite is still around, but much of it is gone. Our gold is almost all gone. All we're left with are big holes in our interior. We must ensure that with our oil, and the oil will be gone in 30 years, Exxon knows that, and that is why they are going to exploit it as fast as they can. Because even before 20 years, oil is done. Our oil is gone. So let us see what Maduro will do with the 300 billion barrels he has. because the world is moving on. And so we must take advantage. So again, I echo what Patrick said. Our governments will have to look at local content, ensure we get a piece of the action, put in laws and regulations in place. But beyond that, and I want to close with this, oil is only temporary. Therefore, we have to transform our economies so that we can compete. I said culture was perspectives, practices, and products. The practices, the perspective we must have, which should be a scientific one to produce goods. We must then cultivate that practice. You know, when you look at how the Far East they have a work ethic that is out of this world. Well, the Indians brought that same work ethic. Let us apply that to Guyana to diversify our economy, so we are not left with just holes in the ground in our soil. But we should not be left just with holes in the ocean in front of us. Let us show the world that we can have a sustainable economy that will take care of all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. It is a lot of food for thought. I would say, like, you've touched globalization, you've touched the culture part, the society as it is, history, and not to be at the least, it's renewable energy as well. Sir, I have a question. We see, like, many people who started the travel across the world, or those who have accomplished traveling, they say the world is, or the people are same all over the world. But when it comes to business or going to a new place, we always say that, like, we have to learn the culture of that place. But that is one of the reason we created this topic for the people who want to invest or do business in Caribbean. But is there some commonity which we can appreciate? Because learning a culture is not a one-day job or like a decade one. So is there any commonity we can find and appreciate to get adapted to the new culture, sir?
Well, I returned to Guyana after 20 years in America and have been trying to answer that question for the last 30 years. I came back in 1990 and have been living at the grassroots. I'm back in my native village where my father came out of what is called the Logis, from the estate where my great-great-grandfather came from Ishmaelpur in Bihar, out off Gaya, just north of Gaya. And we've been trying to answer that question. So the answer is not easy because it is so ingrained, it is structural. But the answer should be this, that we have to first understand what has happened to us. And don't let anybody, in a sense, blame you. Like we are being blamed from rum drinking. We are being blamed for wife beating. We're being blamed for suicide. Well, if you only bring one woman to every 10 men, of course you will have problems of men competing for women and chopping up each other. I'm not excusing it, I'm explaining it. So the same thing with business, the business culture. There's a very famous school of thought called underdevelopment. The Europeans did not just exploit us. For example, take sugar, which was the raison d'etre of our existence. We came to produce sugar. Get me? Sugar is a sweetener, is a top-up, yet our whole existence was to produce sugar. Yet in the whole Caribbean, there is not a single sugar refinery. So you have to produce raw materials and ship it to England, where Tate and Lye has their refineries on the Thames in London, and those refineries are still there. And we still have to send our sugar if it has to be refined. We want that. So there's a notion called underdevelopment, which was imposed on us. So we have to begin to think, we the Guyanese or the Surinamese or the Caribbean people, that we must now see, well, what are the practices that will lead to this industrialization? Because there are different practices. Because in the past, we were taught just to go into the fields, cut cane, bring home cane, come home and drink rum. Right? I'm looking at the house right now, the street behind me, next to the Atlantic Ocean. Right? Every weekend is what they do. They drink, curse up, fight, beat up, everything. You understand? That's the culture. How do we change it? It comes from leadership. It comes from schooling. It comes from our leaders not being removed. I've come back to tiny Guyana, and yet everyone asks me, why are you living in the village? Why didn't you go into one of these gated communities in Georgetown, enclave? And that's the problem. So tiny as our elites are, even though they are one generation removed from the sugar field, as soon as they become a professional, a doctor, a lawyer, some professional, he leaves his village. So there is no demonstrator effect in our village. So a person like me, I deal with children, I talk to children, we try to form a library, you try to show them the computer, you try to show them the CV column. So again, as you said, Balaji, it will not be easy, but we have to develop new practices. The whole work ethic, and this is the good thing that has remained with the Indo-Guyanese and the Indo-Caribbean people. We still have a good work ethic, but we cannot just relax on that. The other people in our community, African Guyanese who are enslaved and may be very hard workers, but they do not have that immigrant mentality to save and to build capital and to invest. We have to now work with them to ensure they have that, because the society will not progress unless all. So in a nutshell, I want to say it is not easy, but all of us will have to put our shoulders to the wheel to change our perspectives, to change our practices, and to get new products, right? We can't be producing sugarcane anymore. We have to now produce other things that the world market needs.
Thank you so much, sir. Again, like rum was not our culture. That has been again reiterated, and we have to practice a lot we brought in, a lot we had before. And then I would ask Mr. Patrick if you want to throw some light on it. Many people say, like again, I'm repeating the question: appreciate the culture. By that, your learning will take a lot of time. So, what should be appreciated in Suriname, Mr. Patrick?
Well, it's learning the culture most definitely takes a lot more time. But if you're coming into an environment wherever it may be, okay, learning the culture, in fact, it'll take some time. But showing respect for the culture while you're starting your business ventures or whatever, or your new job at this new company, whatever, that is already a good start. We have and I think, yeah, to a certain extent, for many years, we have been confronted with yeah, others coming to tell us how to do business. And yes, the way these others do business in London, in Rotterdam, or in Miami is not the same as in Suriname or Guyana. And a perfect example, for example, is a lot of, for example, ocean carriers. Yes, I have the best product. I have the best service in Miami. I have the best service in Rotterdam. But when it comes to understanding the businessman's needs in Guyana or in Suriname, they are lacking. And that's where we as local service providers step up to the plate and fill the void. And that is something that we have developed smartly over the years, whether it's in the rice industry. I think in Guyana, I'm not too informed about it, but if I compare it to Suriname, where we've sort of not really further grew the rice industry, Guyana has substantially grown their rice industry. If you look at the tonnage of rice that they produce per year, to me as a businessman, if I look at the logistics side of it, there's a lot of business opportunities to facilitate the local rice producers, for example in Guyana, a lot more as in Suriname. Anybody coming in from Holland or anybody come from Miami as a carrier representative, for example, will not understand how these companies operate and how they want a lot of things done. And that gives us the advantage locally, and we have built up that knowledge over the years. Yes, we do have issues in our culture. We have the same thing, Guyana and Suriname, whether it's rum shop in Guyana, Paramaribo, or in Georgetown. It's the same problem. But it's still all in all, I could say as a business person that we have come a long way And I think we have now stood our ground through very dire, take advantage of the negative business environments that we have experienced over the many years, Guyana and Suriname. And that is our strength. And that's what we bring to the negotiating table. What other people see as a possible weakness, I see it as those aspects that built up our strength. And we should build on that and move forward. And yes, we have to be corporate government citizens. We have to take care of our community around us. But it starts, for example, with the company and how they treat their employees and how they treat their employees' families to bring about the change in the environment as far as, for example, rum shop ideas are concerned. Now it's perfect. If you're not tested, you will not be driving port equipment. So even the business environment is demanding management and organizations and community leaders to relate that type of information to their employees, but also to the employees' families. So the trend is slow, but it's growing. But anybody coming into Suriname, anybody coming to the Caribbean, yeah, it's going to take a while to understand the way we are. But please show respect, and that will bring you a long way in being able to establish relationships and will allow you to understand our cultural setup much faster. If you're coming knowing it better than everybody else and you're throwing that out at us, believe me, you're going to clash and you're going to have issues, and it will hamper your investment opportunities or your business growth in any Caribbean community. And most definitely Guyana and Suriname that I know, there most definitely you'll have a problem. So just show respect and be humble and work with the local business communities, with the politicians, with the communities to ensure that you're smart in doing what you're doing. That's the way I look at it. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. I would also check with Dr. Sita to throw some light on it.
Okay, I fully agree with Mr. Healy. Reference respect for everyone whom you're in contact with when you enter a new environment. Understand your customers, appreciate people, appreciate people in your environment. But the thing is, you have to communicate. You have to understand your customers. You have to understand the political climate within which you have to interact. So I think I posted a response in the chat section to your question as I interpreted it. So as I believe, when you enter any community for the first time, you need to understand the environment, the human environment, as well as the physical environment. Because the physical environment may also be different. And how we interact within the physical environment as human beings is also relevant to the cultural environment we enter and the culture that we bring to that environment. Our own styles, our own ways of doing things, our own communication styles. So that was just my 2 cents.
And
Thank
the
you.
fact that we are a multicultural communities already gives us a a lead in being able to express the strong need of understanding human beings in and around us. So again, we have a proven track record, if you want to put it that way, as living in multicultural communities, and that has made our product, that is Guyana, that is Suriname, as an investment opportunity, very attractive. And we should be proud of that, and we should stand behind that and understand when individuals or persons or companies come in and trying to treat us differently, that we stand our ground and make sure that they understand with respect that we've been there, we've done that. Believe me, look at the community and let's do business, but let's do it right. That's more or less my 2 cents. You everybody will have to excuse me because I have another meeting to go to also online. Again, really appreciate me being able to participate in this setting, and good luck with the organization. Most definitely, uh, connection building efforts is a must at this time, at this juncture for Guyana, Suriname, but also then for the total business community of CARICOM, and globalization has always been part of it. Like I said, let's take advantage of us now, and let's do the best for our communities moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Thank you. Have a good day. I believe like Dr. Dheeraj Bansal, our dean, would also like to throw some his views.
Thank you. Actually, I was listening to this whole discussion, and I found it very interesting. And I'd like to take a different take, and maybe Mr. Dave or Mr. Nath can help me out there. When you talk about culture, I think it's very important to understand that there is one thing called your work culture, and the other thing is your inherent culture, which you bring from your home country, which decides your mindset. And being someone who has lived in the US for 5+ years, I lived in Caribbean for almost 15 years, and now I'm in Guyana, and I lived and worked in India too. So I've experienced these different cultures from my perspective. And I saw something very interesting happening in US, which I did not see happening in Guyana, is that in US, when Indians migrate to America, they try to act and become like them. And especially one generation down the line, I have seen, especially if the parents migrated, the kids started and behaving, acting more and more American. And I think in 2-3 generations, whatever little bit culture was remaining, you see it vanishing. And that could be, I don't know, that could be the cause of, as uh, Mr. Dev was mentioning earlier, the cause of increased mental health problems in them, which is something interestingly in Guyana. With my personal experience is that they have preserved their inherent culture to a great instance. For example, I still see them, food-wise and other things. They have maintained it to a great extent, which I have not seen in the Western world, where they're trying to dress and eat more like Europeans. I would like to hear your thoughts on that, because this is something I found very interesting from my own personal interest. Thank you.
I think that we need to be clear about what we're talking about when we talk about culture. By definition, culture are those practices which generations value as a means of sustaining life, enhancing and sustaining life. And over time, there are changes in culture. Yes? So when we come to trying to understand Caribbean culture, as I know it, is a melting pot of a number of other cultures. Yes, you have the Indians, which is a large group that settle in Guyana, and they brought their culture with them. They brought, part of the whole deal of these people. I'm sorry, the word has gone out of my head. Not slavery.
Laborers?
No. Indentureship. Part of the deal with indentureship, and I've read some of the original papers on this. The British had to actually agree with the Indian government. Now, you can argue about those agreements, yes, but they weren't just allowed to bring a group of laborers to the Caribbean. they had to include, they had to guarantee they will take some things like food with them. They will take things like people like priests. They will take people like shopkeepers who had an interest in setting up shop for these Indians and such like. And when we look at, I can only talk about Guyana because I haven't looked at the other Caribbean countries in that sort of depth, in the same depth as I would have, looked at countries like England, where I lived for the last 50 years, and Guyana, where I come from. And I have been back recently. And going back, I actually struggle sometimes to understand what is Caribbean culture. And I've actually asked the question, and I had some very blank responses. Yes, because over the years, I see very little change when we talk about the practice of religious cultures. But if you go to India and if you come to the Indian communities in England, there are changes. There are major changes. I mean, as a psychological practitioner, I actually do see a lot of Indians. And I can tell you, one of the difficulties I had, my very first trip to India, was actually motivated by my own conflict of hearing some of the problems that was encountered by the young Indian generations who were having the difficulty of agreeing with everything their parents are telling them in terms of how to behave, how to carry themselves out, and such like. And my very first trip to India in 2005, the very next morning, I woke up, I looked out of my hotel, and there was a park, and I wandered across. And I was surprised to see the interaction between the young people. Whilst there was nothing what I would call vulgar, there was a lot of intimacy exchange quite openly. You know, they were holding hands and sitting in the park. And I had the opportunity to approach some of them and talk to them about what I experienced, because the Indians over here, the older generation, they wanted their children to lead a life as they know Indian life in India. And this was causing a major difficulty for the young Indians because they were born over here, they were growing up over here, they were interacting and mixing with a whole range of different people in school, in sports, in other activities, right? So there was bound to be, you know, when you do that kind of mixing and growing up, that's what we call learning. Most of our learning is not in the classroom. Most of the learning that we do, about 65, 70% of it, is done through vicariously, through socializing, some form of socializing, whether it's sport or thing. And so I would disagree with Ravi when he says that, you know, in the UK, for instance, or in other countries, you can't maintain the culture of eating with your hands, because I will happily go into a restaurant and eat with my fingers, except when I was living in Guyana, I did not like eating with my fingers. But if I was eating something like a roti in an Indian restaurant, it doesn't matter how many white people are there, I will use my fingers. because it doesn't go down well in sensible practice to try and eat a roti and with some curry with knife and fork. You can do it, but it doesn't feel right. Okay? Rice is a different story. I've never gotten into sautéing and that sort of thing. So yes, I will take a spoon and fork and I will eat the rice, whether it's at home or whether it's out in a restaurant. Yes? So there are things that are changeable. Culture is meant to be dynamic. It always has been by definition, right? As people grow and they have new ideas, some aspects of culture will change. In terms of business practices, you know, Patrick said something very useful, which is he used the word understand. There is no way I will go and spend 3 weeks in Delhi and come away thinking I've learned everything about Indian culture, right? And the way business is being conducted in the 21st century or the 20th century as well. You cannot go and do business with people from one land to another and learn culture, their culture, in the context of that short period, right? So what you aim for is to have an understanding, because as Dr. Sita just said, you cannot conduct business without communication. Communication is central to almost everything we do. Okay, so you need to show respect and regard for other people's culture, but if you're going to do good business, then you certainly need to understand the business culture with the people you are actually going to do business with.
Thank you.
Okay, one last thing. I mean, I've worked a long time in psychiatry and psychology, but since 1965, you have a book called Transcultural Psychiatry. And that was written by the head of mental health in WHO. He was there, a Greek guy, was there for a long time. I have a copy on my shelf, actually, and it was one of the first books I've read since becoming interested in cultural aspects of psychiatry. And in there, he had actually started looking and documenting how health conditions and the way these conditions are presented vary from culture to culture. Yes, it's different how Africans look at mental health. It's different how Indians look at mental health. You know, lots of symptoms tend to be somatized. That is, it's instead of it being explained as a mental problem, Indians used to express it in terms of pain. Yes, so that's somatizing it. Their stresses and symptoms, mental health symptoms. And over the years, there has been an awful lot of papers and books since then written about cultural aspect, and certainly in terms of the delivery of healthcare, not just in England and Europe, but you know, across the continents as well. Cultural studies play a major part, and that's because of the movement of people from one continent to the other. You know, we have Sri Lankans here, we have Indians here, we have Pakistanis here, we have people from the Middle East settled here, we have people from Africa settled here, okay? And how you deliver health care to these different groups of people requires us to have better understanding of their cultural practices that will facilitate the ease with which they are able to access services. Yes? So the issue of culture, I don't think worldwide or globally, it's an ignored aspect. I think even in the business world, coaching executives, understanding of other cultures is right there at the top of the list in terms of focus of business education as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nath. Yes, ma'am.
Before Mr. Ravi Dev comes in, I want to support this idea of understanding your own culture, your own history. To be able to appreciate what is around us, we first have to know what is within us. So in that respect, I support Ravi Dev when he says we must understand where our foreparents, how our came from, how they thought, etc., etc., so that we are grounded in our roots. So we have a stepping stone, a place from which we step forward from in our understanding of those around us as we develop our own interactive styles and theories and strategies, etc. And appreciation, of course.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciation of ourselves, and so we have a better appreciation of others. So we first have to understand and appreciate ourselves and where we have come from and how we are made into what we are and why.
And I think that's called your identity, Sita. I think that is absolutely perfectly said. Because where we come from tells us who we are right now. The sum total, people, places, time, yes, all those life experience is what gives us our identity. If you don't understand where you come from, you sure as damn it don't know where the hell you're going. Yes? So when we look at the importance of identity, yes, I will support that completely.
Yes,
If I could give an example, the last ship that left Guyana, the Resurgent, there was one guy who had booked, paid and everything, and he was already on the ship. And just before that gangplank was pulled away, he jumped on it and ran off. He said, "Nabaya, minago." He didn't know what it was he was going to find when he went back, and he recalled the kind of situation that he ran from. But he had become assimilated within this new society that he was now a part of. And so he was afraid of what he would go and find when he had returned. And he preferred the known, and the known being what he had learned over time within his new society. So he preferred to stay there rather than to go on another quest, another adventure, another journey, not knowing what you will find at the other end. So there were 260 persons who were supposed to have returned to India on that repatriation ship. One person jumped off the ship and one person died. So 258 persons actually returned. I'm speaking about from Guyana, right? And Ravi Dev was part of our group when we were working on that project, if I could recall correctly.
it's interesting.
If I may finish the anecdote, the neighboring village to mine, Eiflet, is called Zeeburg. And there was one gentleman who left on the Resurgent to go to India, and he landed in India. And within months, he could not integrate himself back to the village from whence he had come because too much had passed. It was a different world. It was not what he envisaged. And he wrote a letter to his relatives over here. And he said, I'm not sure the Bhojpuri is like a pyasi paisana pyasi. Send money or send a rope, meaning either send money for me to come back or send a rope and I'll hang myself. And in fact, when he returned to Guyana, as small boys, we would tease him when he passed by on a public road. You know, that all that. But apart from the anecdote, this whole notion of understanding from where you come is to me elementary, and it should be. Look at our African Caribbean brothers and sisters. Their culture was totally ripped out of them forcibly.
Mhm.
Had to reclaim that and reconstruct that in order to go forward. And us, in a sense, we were somewhat more fortunate, but still that process on the plantation did something to us, and we have to integrate that. So when we talk about culture, no one ever says culture is static. Culture is always changing because and so what we have from our perspective in India, we talked about the difference between principles and its application, between Shruti and Smriti. Shruti are eternal principles, how you should live your life, what should guide us. What are those some eternal values that make up this notion of dharma? And then in every age, based on what we say, desh, the place, kal, the time, or paristhiti, the circumstances, based on place, time, and circumstances, you have to modify those principles to suit it. And this is the process where our indentured foreparents did not have the luxury because of the forced labor they had to perform from morning till night. But for example, the work that I have been doing in Guyana for the last 30 years with the HSS, we talk about these. We bring children from the age of 6 and into adulthood, and you talk about what are the principles that ought to guide you. You meet for just 1 hour every day, and you talk to them as they grow up, and then you have training. Because our principle is that values cannot be transmitted only in words. It can only be transmitted through action. This was the Guru Shishya Parampara. So in some sense, coming back to the original question from our dean, the Indian parents we find from India, in fact, I lived 20 years there from 72 to 92. And it was a joke to me that the Indians from India, whom we looked up to, you know, in Guyana, that they would be the purveyors and the bearers of culture, they just stripped themselves of culture as soon as they landed in America. It was a big joke among us Guyanese and Trinidadians and all that. But that's the point. The point is, how do you have that continuity, accepting there will be change, but to make the adjustment? So take, for example, the principle of respect for elders, which is a fundamental principle of Indian culture. That has to come from you. So in my home, I have a daughter and a son in Guyana. They were born here. They've done real well, not to make it boast and all that. They top the Caribbean in terms of their exams and all that. One is a doctor, one will be a lawyer in a minute, a month or so. The point is, though, they have these values because they were transmitted consciously through discussion. So this is what we teach the parents in the areas. I live on my part of Guyana, and you take parents and you discuss these things with them. They talk to their children, you talk to women, you talk to men, but you have to act in that fashion. So coming back to the business culture now, and I will support Krish on this thing like that. While we may have our particular cultural nuances, there are certain practices we would accept that if you want the result, you have to do it that way. When I came back to Guyana, I had a lot of interactions with Mr. Desmond Hoyt, who was then the president of Guyana. And he told me the problem is he had brought in a company from Malaysia, Barama, and they were going to cut lumber and all that. But the most important thing, they were going to add value to it by having a plywood factory and a veneer factory. So he entreated Barama, don't put the factory up in the remote Northwest District. Put it right on East Bank Demerara, where a lot of his supporters were living. The problem was, and this is where Mr. Hoyt was chuckling with me, he told me, he said, Ravi, every Friday night, those workers were jumping the fence to go to a party or what have you, Friday or Saturday night, because that is our culture. But if you want to compete in the plywood market of the world, you have to be able to meet demand. you have to be there. So if you needed 3 shifts, you got to be there for 3 shifts. You got to show up. You got to be disciplined. You got to work. You got to produce. Now, if we want to be laid back and say everything is mañana, well, then you're not going to be able to compete. And this is what happened in Guyana, the bauxite industry. To conclude this portion, we have something called calcined bauxite, the bauxite that you make kilns in, that drives the whole industrial West, because it's kiln that you have molten metal. And we have the best because the aluminum oxide content is the highest in our calcined bauxite. Yes, but after we nationalized and chased out the Canadians, we couldn't supply that market, and Chinese ore, which is far inferior to ours, captured the market and still captures the market because they met their deliveries. So the person would rather use 3 tons of Chinese ore to our 1 ton because they never got our 1 ton. The point I want to conclude, we can ask, and we must insist that foreigners, when they come to do business, they have to respect our culture. But if they want to set up a business and you want that business to compete in a globalized world, because Guyana's market is what a bucket of warm spit. You have to compete in the world market. And if you want to do that, then you have to be able to satisfy the requirements of that. And so, for example, in my 30 years as a consultant to various businesses, that is what I do. That the workers have to be now trained into this new way of being on time, of showing up for work, of being able to produce measurable and all of the other things in business management. So, for example, even in Shaka, and I conclude here, even with a 6-year-old, we give them 45 minutes for a young 6-year-old in Shaka, this little meeting of young boys, and they have to plan their own games that they would play. But what is planning? Planning for playing a game, which game you would have, how would you pick your teams, how would you have your referees and all that. It's the same as running a business. And this is why India has been able to move ahead, because finally India has over 100,000 shakas meeting every day to train the people, not only in the values, we do that, also in values that this modern world will make us survive. And I'm going to have to run, unfortunately. I also, I'm 8 minutes past my time. So I'd like to ask to be excused. And I got to be okay, Nalaji?
Thank you so much, G. Thank you for your food for thought, and the discussion was very, very, very interactive. And thank you for all the participants. Mr. Nath, we will discuss in WhatsApp after this, and we look forward for the next meeting soon, end of the next month, and we'll keep you engaged with a lot of informations from the community and the society. Yeah, thank you once again.